Okay, so the directions here are not on here, but they're simply to graph this function right here, y equals 4 times the cosine of 2x plus 1. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and graph this without our calculators. So what the first thing I want to do is really rewrite this thing, right? Rewrite it. Factor out the coefficient of x, which is 2. So factor that out. We have to factor 2 out of pi. Well, you get pi over 2. Right? 2 times pi over 2 is pi. So I want it like this because then I can see my what we call omega, right? And I can see my phase shift, right? Which is it's going to be a horizontal shift of pi over 2. We'll talk about which way here in a second. So we have a step-by-step process to doing these. If you remember, the first step was to find the amplitude. That's easy. Amplitude's 4, right? Also in our first step was to find the period, which is 2 pi over omega, in this case 2 pi over 2, so I have a period of pi, okay? Alright, first step's easy. Now the second step, the way we did these in class, we want to find the starting point. Okay, so if you remember, if our equation is of this form, let me go ahead. See. If it's of this form, the amplitude times the cosine of omega times x minus phi over omega, a little sloppy there, then our starting point is phi over omega, right? So ours is almost like that, but we got a plus here. So what is our phi over omega, our phase shift? Our phase shift is in fact negative, right? That means it's going to start at negative pi over 2. Okay. Let me go ahead and erase that so I have more room. I'm going to erase that. Okay. Alright, so I know where it starts. Alright, I'm going to have to go to my graph and make markings for all these points. We'll get to that in a second. I know where it starts, and I got to know where it ends. Alright, so let's see. If it starts at negative pi over 2, that's going to end. That is, when I say end or start over, might be a better way to write that. That is, we're talking about one cycle here. Right? It's not the whole thing. It's going to start and end there. It's one cycle of this cosine curve. So the ending point is simply where it starts. If it has a period of pi, right, which we found in part 1, then that's when it starts over, right? That'll be the end of one cycle and the start of a new one. So negative pi over 2, if I add pi to that, then of course I'll get positive pi over 2. Okay. So let's see. I can start marking these now. I think what I'm going to do is call this negative pi over 2. That's pi over 4 negative, 0, pi over 4 positive, and I have one cycle in there. Why did I pick those? Well, I know I'm going to have to break this into 4 parts, right? So I want markings for those parts. And that's really our next step. Step 3, find our 5 special points. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 special points. I know the x values for my first and my last. That means it starts at negative pi over 2. And it ends at positive pi over 2. Okay, now, what are the y values here? Well, it's the cosine curve. There's no negative in front of it. So it's going to be, if the amplitude was 1, it would start at y equals 1, right? But the amplitude is 4 times that. So it's going to start up there at 4, okay? And then what happens when it repeats itself at pi over 2? Well, it's in the same place, okay? I could even fill in the y values before I find the x values if I want, because it's going to start up at 4. Let's see, over here. It's going to start up at 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to go down to 0. It's going to go down to negative 4. It's going to go up to 0. And then it's going to go up to positive 4, right? So I can even fill those y values in. It doesn't matter when you do that. You just, as long as you know how this cosine curve is acting, okay? But what we need to do is figure out these other x values, how we break it up. You can probably see it on my graph, but if you couldn't get that far and you want to do this part first, then that's fine. If you want to do this part first, how do I get these? Well, I have to know I'm going to break this curve into 4 equal parts, right? 4 equal parts, as we do with all our cosine sine curves. And the thing is, if it has a period of pi right here, then to break it into 4 equal parts, I would divide that by 4, right? That's going to be the step. That is, that's how far I'm going to go from here to here, pi over 4, from here to here, pi over 4, from here to here, pi over 4, and from here to here, pi over 4. Okay, so in other words, I'm just starting at negative pi over 2 and adding pi over 4, and going from there. These are the steps I'm taking. So negative pi over 2 plus pi over 4 is negative pi over 4. My next step, my next x value, it's going to be right here. And then I'm going to add pi over 4 to that. Add pi over 4 to that, you get 0 x value. And then add pi over 4 to that, well, that's easy. 0 plus pi over 4, pi over 4. Okay. And it goes from 4, it's going to go down to 0, it's going to go down to negative 4, and then pop back up to 0, and then up to 4. Okay, so those are my 5 points. So let's graph it. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where it starts. And then down to 0, down to negative 4, back up to 0, and up to 4. So there's one cycle of a cosine curve, right? I'm going to continue out one more cycle. These are steps of pi over 4, right? Still steps of pi over 4. So what would happen? Well, 3 pi over 4. That's pi. Right? It's just going to continue on with a period of pi. Okay. So I can mark all those values if you want. They're just steps of pi over 4. You can continue it back this way also. Just using really the period of this thing in order to get a nice graph for it. Continue a couple more cycles. Okay, and that's a cosine curve for cosine 2x plus pi. Okay.